Bob, how have your motivations for practice changed over time?
Um, I'd say substantially in regards to three distinct phases. When I first got involved with this, it was about getting control of the Kundalini process because I went through that when I was quite young. That was very uncomfortable. Then that morphed into getting the spirit world to leave me the hell alone. Um, that was like phase two. And then phase three basically centered on Barden's mandala from the cover of the third book. Even though when I started that process 5 years ago, we didn't really know what we were doing. It was just as we would consecutively finish the letters that led into the planets, and then that led into the outer planets, and then that led into the zodiac, and then finally into the Sephiroth. It was like opening a series of locks. And it wasn't until I'd say probably halfway through the zodiac that we kind of began to figure out, all right, where is this going? Whereas previously it had simply been a process of exploration, if that makes any sense. And that's about as philosophical as I like to get with any of this, by the way. As many people know, I view the process as being exceedingly mechanical. It's very much engineering, and you do A and you get B. Depending upon your physiology, practice, and lifestyle habits, it might take a little longer. Some of us can deadlift 250 kilos with a minimum of training, and some of the rest of us, that might take 5 or 6 years. Because of how we're built and lifestyle and all that other kind of stuff. But ultimately, the techniques you use to get there are exactly the same. It just might be a little easier for one guy or gal than another. So that's pretty much it. Oh, and of course, along the way, creating a way of doing this that doesn't take 30 years the way it did for me, to where a person who's willing to put the work in, as James said, can do this in 3 or 4, to be completely honest with you. And that's ultimately probably going to be the legacy more than anything else, is just taking really bad pedagogy, fixing that so that it's practical for someone to do this and still have something left over for the rest of their life. Versus spending decades just trying to figure out what's going on in order to do it at all. I've used an example before, and this will be the last thing I'll say about this, but the major problem the esoteric community has is we're continually reinventing algebra every generation. And because we're not willing to share, and we're not willing to talk to each other, and we're not willing to write things down bereft of philosophy, focusing on instead how to do it, we reinvent algebra every generation, but we never get to calculus. I'm trying to at least get the algebra into a forum where you can learn it relatively quickly in a couple of years. So maybe somebody does eventually get to calculus. But that's my main long-term goal at this point.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I have a personal sort of interest in that term pedagogy, coming from a background as being a teacher, because the opportunity for creative teaching within, if we just look at Barden's book and look at that series of exercises, and then we look at what other teachers have brought to it, and then all of the width of opportunity to explain those fingers pointing at the moon in 100 different ways, there's a real opportunity for creativity to unfold. And I've actually got a question about that as well. But one thing I love is that, is teachers being forced to be creative, say on their YouTube channels, and come up with new ways of explaining similar things. I mean, as a teacher of music, I had to repeat myself a lot, and I had to make it interesting for myself as well, and come up with new ways of saying the same thing, so that, there are some things that had to be reinforced. And I think that if you only get a chance to write one book, actually, that'd be a great question. I might have to note that one down. If you only had a chance to write one book, you know, how would you play it? Because I kind of feel Barden probably had the same thing. He's like, I'm probably only going to be able to write one book, so I need to make a way that's going to be okay. Not too much ambiguity. I'm going to keep it all on track. Okay, James. Now, how have your motivations for practice changed over time?
Well, I think for me, the goal originally was just to find the material, right? The great search that we all go on. It's a lot easier these days, but back in those days, that was travel. That was, as one of my kung fu friends said, kissing a lot of frogs in terms of teachers, and going down a lot of rabbit holes, to find that these teachers were possibly not what they made themselves out to be. And also, I think as well, over time, my idea of what a teacher is and what a teacher can do for you and what they, more importantly, can't do for you has changed. So yeah, first of all, it was finding the material, and I remember very clearly when I found Barden's, it was after I just left the UK, which was also in accordance with leaving another teacher. So I was like, I've had enough of this. I'm out of here. And basically, then I found Barden's, and I was like, oh, thank God. I just now the only limit to what I can do is what I do. It's not my nightmare was that the material was always held very tightly by the teacher, feeding you a little bit over the decades, and that you would never get the full picture. That was always my concern. It's like you don't want to invest yourself in some material and you can never get the full package, which is very much the way things are done traditionally, and which is why I've gone from being very traditional to very kind of anti-traditional, because I've seen so many teachers paying for their kids' education and their second house by stringing the students along. If it takes longer for you to do that practice than it does for you to get a medical degree, something's going wrong somewhere. It shouldn't take you that long. So it's either you or the material, the way it's taught. So yeah, my motivation, first of all, was to find it. Then it was to achieve it. I suppose going back to my original, fears when I first went into the Buddhism, that was I must escape samsara. It was like if I don't do anything else, I've got to do this. And so I was all consumed in practice, and I'm probably completely imbalanced, consumed in practice. And now I'm probably, now I get the same amount of practice done, but without that anxiety of having to do the practice. So now my motivation for practice is to make it as efficient as possible, and also to try and help people not make the same mistakes I made, in regards to the waste of time, in regards to the in regards to allowing teachers to kind of interfere in your I think a teacher should, like a gardener, should help prune but stay out the way, which is why I loved Mark Rasmus so much, because he cleanly presented the material and there was nothing of Mark there. It was just the material, and he only wanted the best for you. So I kind of took that on as my template for Perseus as well, so that teachers that we have on Perseus are people that I feel first and foremost truly have the best interest of the student at heart. It's got to be number one. And so my motivation now is to kind of, through Perseus, put out more efficient means for people to get, I'm already seeing people like they're in various teachers' courses who've done what I've done in 25 odd years, and they've done it in free. Oh my God, what am I doing? But it just shows when you have a clean path and people around you that want you to succeed, it can be done.
Yeah.
So these people go way beyond where we are, So that's my motivation now: clean, clear paths for people to achieve what they can achieve with no interference, no obstacles from the teacher or the lineage.
Wonderful, thank you. And that speaks to my heart about just getting to it. Like it's not even so much that there's no time to waste. It's more like, I find myself just like wanting to sort of separate the dross, because there is so much noise in the world,
Yeah.
so many factions seeking to capture attention, and it's very pervasive. And so by focusing on just finding the best practices, that desire to do that particular thing there leaks over into other areas of life. Very helpful. It's almost like a concentration exercise. And motivations changing as you do the practices too has been something I've quite enjoyed discovering, because it's like some of these exercises are almost like vitamins that I didn't know, or nutrition that I didn't know I needed. And when I got it, I feel a relief or a sense of, oh, okay, I remember this thing. I've lost this thing. And now it's like once that's squared away, if you will, or you've got it back in the bag, in the pocket, new ideas of how you can express, create, and be in the world sort of come forward. And it's like, well, okay, before I was sort of wanting to do this, but now, for whatever reason, I'll speculate, but now I want to focus more on this. And, talking with all of the wonderful teachers that come on this podcast and sort of hearing their stories, one thing that comes true to me is that this is an ever evolving and unfolding process. And I think that's one of the reasons why, it remains to be continuously interesting, is that it's not one of these sort of same shit different day kind of situations, like it's, things are evolving, they're constantly shifting, and it's great. It literally is that sort of unraveling adventure. But enough of me. Didi and Armand. Didi, I'd love to hear from you. How have your motivations for practice changed over time?
I think it just kind of started with, well, things that were going on in my life that I wanted to solve, that I wanted to, for me, and I've talked about that before, for me, kind of an entry point was also food. Because I actually, it was just after you started your Tai Chi. And I always had stomach aches. I mean, what's that to do with practice? But it kind of, when his teacher, he gave me a book on five element food, and that kind of started a whole journey for me. And of course, Armand came home from Tai Chi practice, and they were talking about um, the all the books and all the background stories and the Chinese. I it actually made me go back to school, study traditional Chinese medicine. Armand, he got into well study with Rasmus, and so it kind of. But that was my first entry into practice for me. So it came out of, yeah, that something wasn't going well for me, and then it was just a search. And I have to say, it kind of sparked when I was 16. I went to Thailand for a year, and that brought me. I lived up north in Payao, as somewhere where nobody spoke English, only foreigner there. This was 95, 96. So it was kind of culture shock. I said I've never been to a meditation retreat, but that was much as a meditation retreat as you can get, because I couldn't communicate with people. Like we had no common language, so it was quite something. But it got me in touch with Buddhism, got me into the Asian way. So moving forward, I think there was a spark there, and then my life just led me to living kind of going, find a job, doing the regular thing, and not feeling well. Yeah, and then looking for another path. And if I look at the motivation now, it's like I've come so far, but I feel like, oh, we are all power beings. We have all these abilities, and now I opened up these possibilities, and we're sharing, and I get more information from our students. I read a lot of books, and I see like, oh, there's so much more out there. There's always more um, to know, but also to experience. And yeah, so I get really, I'm a really curious person, but it's also to see, okay, where am I in my life, and how can I make it better, better, better. And yeah, so
Wow.
in short, kind of, yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. And Armand.
Well, yeah, my first motivation was just, I was very desperate, you could say. I had to learn how to steer the rocket. I was just so much energy, but so up and down. And there was this sense of like, I'm not being taught everything there is, right? I was like, there's so much more going on than people say. So I was very confused, you could say. And I was always drawn to the left where everyone was going to the right. But I felt lonely sometimes in that as well. I felt confused, etc. So then the first moment I saw Tai Chi in front of me, it was like, there's something going on here which can help me. I just sensed it. I just felt it's like and that got me into the training, and the motivation was there just to, I don't know. I mean that develops obviously, but the stillness, the focus I was searching for was in there. The now that I sort of recognized in it was like, there's some deep things happening here, and I was so super lucky that my first Tai Chi teacher was a very very genuine guy. It was mixed Tai Chi mixed with Kung Tao, so it was really really rough, tough stuff, a very traditional, coming from the south of China to Indonesia, from Indonesia to the Netherlands, very obscure, very small group, very tight knit, but these were intellectuals as well. They would study, there were Chinese guys in there. They did, went to the university here. They studied with, my teacher studied with Christopher Schipper for a while. He is a very famous Dutch Taoist who wrote a classic called it's a Taoist, the living religion of China. So, there was not only that fighting art, there was, this guy had rows of books, they spoke Chinese. So there was this learning. It was like university for me. I never went to university myself. I stopped after high school, you could say. The rest was self-taught in all sorts of ways. I didn't fare well in school. I fell out. I was like overboard, and I was always drawn to the arts, like music, and I was drawn to martial arts and painting, expression in general. So when I was in that group, and I was in that for 11 years straight, they were like, like a small family. It was like 10 people max in that thing. The shift to wanting to know more about Taoism really started to happen. It's like, this is going to explain something for me. But it was also a bit abstract in a sense. I think culturally, maybe abstract too, to understand some of these things. Although, I got more and more experience with it. But then the most profound thing happened is that my teacher at a certain point said, I think you're done with me now. I cannot really help you anymore. But I know a guy. That was, by the way, that was the first thing that happened. It's like, I was never online, right? This was already, I started in 2006 with him, and then up to 2017, I was never on YouTube watching anything. I was just doing his stuff. It was just in it, and there was no time for it. We're just always training. I would train the whole morning. I was teaching at night. I was a musician. So I had the benefit of having a lot of practice time. But then he recommended Mark Rossens to me. And that was incredible. He's like, no, you guys go to Thailand every now and then. So, look him up. So I went online, wrote him an email. He was incredible. Right from the start, I was like, what is this? I was so like, and now it became real magic. So the thing is, I went from, sort of like desperation to going to training, getting into touch with myself again and having deeper understanding. And I fell into like, the best teacher you could imagine, right? I fell into his lap, you could say. I went over, started training with him. Now, all the stuff that was not clear yet, I think James said it very right. It's like in 5 days, it was very clear. It's like, oh, you mean that? Oh, you mean that? Oh, you mean that? It's like, I was so ready for it. I was so aligned and ready for it. So that came into me. And then from there, of course, I was already starting to teach locally. And then the whole shift started to happen. It's not only my training, but it's like you train for the benefit of others. And this is what I hear everyone say, right, in this group. It's like you start realizing that this is not tradition. The tradition is evolution. Tradition is evolution. So, and I started to realize, like, wait a minute, we've got something to offer here, and we can, so what I found out, and our unique combination as well, what we cut together, is just, it's going out there, and so, it goes from desperation, you could say, to, you could say, like, this journey, and it continues, right? It just keeps continuing. And I never stop training now. There's never a moment I don't train, because I live the practice, right? It's just, it's not that kind of practice per se. I mean, there's certain stuff that is a topic, you could say, but I live it, So, so that's the sort of, this was not short, sorry, but sort of in a nutshell what I was trying to get across. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. And I think too that stories and how we get to these situations are valuable, because, if it's just dry information, if it's just dry data, sometimes it doesn't quite sort of get traction as good. So you're welcome to meander your way towards your to whatever we're saying, people, and thank you so much. Please do.